So, the Calgary Flames, with a convincing victory over the Chicago Blackhawks last night. It was on Amazon Prime. We all loved it. We all enjoyed things and everything like that. Calgary has now won 3 in a row and are back into a playoff spot as we record this at 10:59 a.m. Mountain Time here on a Tuesday. Obviously, the big takeaway from this game is Rory Kerins. Just an unbelievable NHL debut. And really, how do you not get excited about a story like that? You know, we talk about romanticizing things all of the time. Pro wrestling is a love story, all of that. Well, this is the romantic side of the world of hockey, as Rory Kerins is a kid, very late round draft pick, has grinded his way, worked up into professional hockey, and now injuries are happening. And it just doesn't feel like it's going to really click for him. And now all of a sudden, he has figured out either luck or whatever is on his side, and the injury bug has gone away, and he is having a career year. And then an opportunity opens up, unfortunate as it may be for Connor Zary, an opportunity opens up, and Rory Kerins dives in, and he has an unbelievable moment. This is such a fantastic story, and the type of thing that makes sports, and this sport, just as great as it could possibly be. There's a lot of bad in this sport, obviously, but there's a lot of great in it as well. And so to see him step up in that way, it just gives you a lot of confidence, and it makes you feel really, really great. And I think there's a few layers to this one. On the one hand, Big Mako, I think I've said your name differently both times, and I know you've been on here before, and I know how to say it, and so I'm apologizing for messing that up. But the kids look good, and it was nice to see the Flames not play down to a worse team. That's certainly something they have done in the past, and something they've done this season. And, I mean, with Chicago, even like pre-Bedard times, they would kind of play down to that team at certain moments. But this team has a bit of a different mentality right now. And that has been the overall thing that we have talked about with the Calgary Flames throughout this season. And we'll talk in a little bit about if the playoffs are actually a realistic thing, or where is this thing going to ultimately lead. But the one thing that I have been focusing on this year with this team more than anything is process over results. And that right there, that comment, for those watching live on Twitch, that comment is something that gives you a lot of confidence about where this thing is going. This is not an overly talented hockey club by any stretch of the imagination. More talented than we thought, but not an overly talented hockey club. And so they are going to, if they are going to be successful, they are going to have to play a way where it is basically all out, all the cliche, 110%, all of that for 82 games. And last night was a good example of that working. There's every opportunity, bit of a weird little stretch with stuff going on in California and everything like that. And now, actually, a couple very important games with the Blues coming up. So very easy to just look past a Monday night out in Chicago. And they didn't. And they had their focus on this night and this night alone. And they came out and they got the job done. That is great to see. Also, Big Mako, thank you so much for the subscription there. I greatly appreciate it here on Twitch. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate the support. For the Flames, again, it's the process. And a big part of this process, and it's something we've talked about a little bit, and we are seeing it here. And look, this could end up being the best game of Rory Kerins' career, and he Walker Tours this thing, and in 20 games we're talking about, hey, remember when that happened? There's a possibility that happens. I don't think we're going to see that. I don't know if this kid's going to be at a 164 assist pace for the rest of his career, but I understand that maybe this is just a one-game thing, but we have now seen a number of examples of players coming from the American Hockey League up to the National Hockey League and fitting in perfectly, to the point where this can't be a mistake now, right? And it is something that they've talked about for a really long time, and it was tough to do with Daryl Sutter, but they have now this organizational kind of, they're in sync. I'm sure there's a businessy way to say it, but they are in sync right now with everything there. And we have seen the last couple of years, Zary comes up better than expected. Pospisil comes up better than expected. We've seen Matt Coronado eventually gets called up, and it's best case scenario. Pelche is on an incredible run right now. Kirkland earlier this year called up incredible. Hit or miss. doesn't really add to my point. Doesn't take away from it either. The point being is that this team now has done such a great job of this is what we do in the this is what we do in the NHL. We're going to do it in the AHL. And Ryan Huska has a very good understanding of how we are going to make these kids successful. It was right there. It was sitting right there for them. He and Pelche, unbelievable this season in the American Hockey League. So put them together. Makes sense, right? It's so obvious. But I feel like regimes in the past, not to, again, a bit of a drive-by at Daryl Sutter, but regimes in the past is, oh yeah, well, that worked out, but this is the NHL, so you're on the fourth line. It made so much sense. It put him in the exact right spot to succeed, and succeed it did. And now if you're the Flames, again, assuming that this isn't just a one-night thing, you now have 3 pairs that you feel pretty comfortable with right now, with Huberdeau and Kadri, Backlund and Coleman, the OGs, and Pelche and Kerins. And now, like, Backlund and Coleman with Coronado, chef's kiss, perfect, no notes. Sharon Govich gets a big one last night with Kerins and Pelche. Phenomenal. Love that. Pospisil with Huberdeau and Kadri, it could be going better for him, but that line is going pretty well. And so right now you feel pretty comfortable about where you are at from a Flames standpoint in seeing where this thing is kind of going. And again, when you are looking at the kind of long-term build of this, right now, Pelche and Kerins is your third line. I would suggest that's probably where it stays, right? Like, that's probably, there is an upper bound limit to this thing. We're not talking about the next McDavid, Draisaitl, Crosby, Malkin here. But we are talking about, again, one of the things that this team has done pretty well is the foundation. If they do get to go out and add a franchise, elite, whatever you want, center, this isn't going to be like the cautionary tale that they played last night, where they got Connor Bedard and didn't have anything ready for them. They are now, ironically, set up in a way to get that player, but it is set up too well, and they're not getting that guy. So it's a great situation, I think, for the Flames to be in, because if ping pong balls go their way, or anything like that, then they are, I think, in a phenomenal spot. I think they're in a better situation than Chicago. I think they're in a better situation than San Jose, who just got the last 2. But yeah, like Toxic said, great young players in the system. I'm worried we won't be bad enough to get a number 1 center. It's the only missing piece to the puzzle. And yes, this is the whole Montreal thing too, with the pick hanging over, adds a degree of difficulty to the situation as well. But I like how this is going. And, I mean, we do, on this Twitch stream, we do Flames stuff all the time. And, like, this is just play the kids and see what happens. And what has happened is better results than I think you could have possibly imagined for so many of these guys. And it puts you in a good spot. So it goes to kind of the overall kind of bigger picture question of what this whole segment is. And what the next 40 games is going to be about for the Calgary Flames. Can the Calgary Flames make the playoffs? Well, the obvious answer right now is, well, duh, they're in a playoff spot today. The Calgary Flames right now sit in the final wildcard spot in the Western Conference with 49 points, with a record of 21-14-7, which I will go to my grave reminding everyone that's just a 500 hockey team. They just happen to wait a little bit longer to lose some of those games, but that is also life in the NHL. It's like, this is a side quest entirely, but it's like, oh, this guy's a good tournament poker player. That's what a real good tournament poker plays. Oh, so he hangs around long enough to not lose his money and gets into the money, and that's what makes him a good tournament poker player. There's obviously more nuance to that, but that's basically what this is. The Flames are a good regular season hockey team because they wait longer to lose the games. Not to the level of the Vancouver Canucks, who are at 10 overtime losses right now, which if one of those converted to a win, we're not talking about the Flames in a spot right now. But Calgary does have a 1-point edge on the Vancouver Canucks with equal games played, and they have a 5-point edge on the St. Louis Blues going into this little home and home. And so that is where kind of the upward pressure is coming from, right? Like Utah, even though they're a point back with 2 games in hand, the Gunther injury really sucks for them right now. So I don't know if that's going to be a team that you feel overly threatened by right now. So your window is pretty small in the teams that you're focusing on. The one thing I do have concerns with is that I don't know how much more, again, upward mobility there is for the Flames. Like, I doubted the Kings this year. I still don't love them as a team. But at this point, we're halfway through the season. They're 14-2-1 at home. They're just they're a good hockey team. And so that's going to be a difficult one to catch. And so the issue is there's more teams behind them that you feel like, okay, well, that might be better than the Flames. Then there are teams ahead of them that it's, well, the Flames are better than those guys. Because the Central Division, forget it. That is a ridiculous division, what they have going on there right now. And Vegas and Edmonton are just a tier above at this point. But I do think that this is a Calgary Flames team that can absolutely make their way to the postseason. Now, you guys are raising some points in the chat here. Big saying, flame scoring is my main worry. And that is absolutely the main cause for any kind of concern with this group, is that this team right now is at 2.67 goals per game, which is good for 26th in the National Hockey League, which honestly feels a bit high for 2.67 goals per game. And looking at it right now, their goal scoring leader is Jonathan Huberdeau with 18, which is already a Calgary Flames high for him. You have Kadri at 15, and you have Matt Coronado at 10. All of the, like, Huberdeau's shooting percentage is a little bit high. I don't know if there's going to be a whole lot coming from that, but there are a couple that I think more is coming from. Specifically Sharangovich. I think we're going to get more now from him. I do think Coronado with Backlund and Coleman, there's going to be a little bit more of that coming, but I also think Backlund and Coleman have maybe regressed a little bit further down to the mean than you would expect. Both of them were shooting percentages right around 10. I just think that some of these guys are due for a bit of a boost when it comes to the offensive side of things. Obviously, the big whole thing in the room is Kuzmenko, and if he does ever figure it out fully on the offensive side of things, then you really got something. And so it does put the Flames in an interesting spot, because as you mentioned, they have very obvious needs, right? Like, they need a number one center long term, and they need scoring. The first isn't available out there right now. That one you're probably going to have to draft, unless there's an Elias Pettersson thing, which we could get into a conversation about it. I just, maybe this is for later on in the week, because I think you can talk yourself into actually believing that would make sense to actually do that. But that needs a whole bigger thing. It does put the Flames in an interesting spot where, like, there is probably going to be some goal scoring out there, right? When you're looking at the trade board and stuff like that. Like, there are a few pieces out there that from a rental standpoint, it would make some sense and it would fill some holes and you could actually make a bit of a charge. But that is, again, getting away from the long-term kind of view of this team where you do want to get the kids these opportunities. And that is kind of the value of this, is if you aren't going to tank, at least give these kids a view of what the playoff race is and a view of what these meaningful games are. And yeah, you had a great win against the Chicago Blackhawks, but now you got to play again tonight against the St. Louis Blues. And that is a huge game. And really, like, I don't want to overstate it because it is still January. But we are kind of into we're into the back half of the season now. And you look at these next two games, it's not even a home and home. It's back-to-back away games in St. Louis. It's a monster series. The Blues are looking at this as their season. And that's something that you have to learn as a young team, is like, maybe this team doesn't have the bullseye on them right now that a Vegas or an Edmonton or out east of Florida would have as established teams. But right now you have the spot that everyone else wants. And the Blues, if they win these two games, all of a sudden they are within a point of that playoff spot, and for them, it's on. But if you can go out and just bury them, I'm not saying you put them away for good, although that would put you 9 points clear of them, and they would then be at 46 games played, and I don't think that they could make that comeback. It would take them a while at least to get back into it. So this is a real opportunity and a real learning spot for the Calgary Flames. And so back to the overall question again, can this team make the playoffs? I genuinely think that they can. I really, really, really know that, or I really, really think that this is a team that can kind of scratch and claw their way into a playoff spot. It does not help the long-term overall whatever. And you are going to have to get maybe a little bit creative to get that number one center into this organization. And it's tough because this is a year where it was ready-made. It was right there, right? You have 8 of the top 10 picks in the first round are centers. it's there. It's right there. But this team is growing and developing in a way that I don't know if a lot of people saw coming. And that is overall, I think, a positive, even if it kind of goes against the net negative here. Toxic. Zari at his best is a prime Lindholm. That's interesting. I will be honest. I kind of thought for a bit that Zari's best was kind of a second or third line guy, depending on what team it was and just kind of where he was clicking at. I think now, Prime Lindholm, I don't know if he's ever going to be that defensively. But from an offensive standpoint, like that, I think that there's worse comparisons you could make for sure. I haven't really thought of it like in terms of what an actual comparison would be, but I think that when you see the steps that he has taken now and the gifts that he very clearly has and that he has worked on and cultivated here at the NHL level, he has really grown into a role now where he can, I think, be quite successful at being kind of a, I don't want to say number one center because that implies that I think the job is done, and I don't think it is. I think that if this team goes off and wins a Stanley Cup, Zary is probably their second line center, and if they're a dominant whatever, he's their third line center. But I do think that he can be a number one center on this team, and you're not looking at it like, oh, that's your number one center. Like, I don't think he's ever going to be that. Also, Toxic. I don't know with Vladar in net. That has been another part of this, and something I kind of haven't touched on yet. But again, talking about the process over results and figuring out where this thing is going, you figured out the goalie. Right? Like, Dustin Wolf is, as the kids would say, Dustin Wolf is him. That they have got that part figured out. And that is, when you're looking at coming out of a rebuild, ask Buffalo, ask Ottawa, ask probably Montreal, ask Philadelphia forever. What is the toughest thing to do when you're trying to come out of that? It is the goaltending situation. And the Flames now, I think, have that part kind of figured out. So, again, they have an interesting kind of conundrum where it has progressed quicker than they thought, but not so quick that it's like, oh, job is done. It's a very interesting spot for this team right now, but I think for the Flames, you will absolutely take it. And in 3 years, we're going to be looking back at this. I mean, look, I just did a thing yesterday on the Pittsburgh Steelers where it's like, if you could have sucked just one of those years and got your franchise quarterback, that would have been great. I think we're going to look back at this time and maybe be like, like, that was fun and all of that. Probably would have been better if you were just bad and we could have got a number one center and just been on our way. Although there's a pretty good one, next year in the draft. So maybe things will kind of bounce their way. But interesting times for the Flames. And I guess the overall, again, kind of final summary, once again, asking the question, can this be a playoff team? You're goddamn right they can be. And they are looking more and more like a playoff team with every passing game.